Hi, I'm Leah Cook with Sandpaper and Wax Design. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook or at sandpaperandwaxdesign.com. I am an artist in resident for Amy Howard, and today we are going to do a Venetian plaster wall art. So this is Milieu, the spring edition. And there is a piece that we're gonna emulate. It's really pretty. I don't know if you've seen these really gorgeous pieces, and they're paper mache. This is by Casa Gusto or Get the Gusto. You can find them on Instagram. And so they make their frames, their paper mache, and it kind of goes into a little bit of detail about how they construct these, and they're really pretty. So that's what we're going to work on today. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. It's not specific particularly, so you can decide how much detail you want to put into it or simplify it. So what we're gonna need, excuse me, I have kids home today with pink eye. We will need Venetian plaster. Henry, I'm recording.
Let me show you.
Okay, well you have to wait.
What?
We'll need 1-step white paint.
For what?
Go away. We will need a trowel.
Who are you talking to?
I'm making a video. Bye. Love you. Go. A trowel, a hawk. You'll need I use the Amy Howard's 2.5-inch stiff brush to move the medium. You'll need 3 bowls, and depending on if you want to make your actual, if you want to make this, you can make them with paper, or you can use faux flowers, which I'll show you in a second. So we'll get started. I'll go over different options and how to go ahead and begin. All right, so I'm going to show you the sample that you guys saw in the promo. So that's the piece I did originally, and I've done many since this. This one I did on a canvas, and see I've wrapped it with jute and Venetian plaster, and then made my own frame. And then I wanted to add texture, so this is actually bathroom tissue. And I created my sculptures using aluminum foil as the form, and then wrapping it with the caproni wrap. So you can also use a caproni wrap in this. They play well with each other. It's both plaster. Yeah, and then you can add design. You can cut it. Milk paint's great for Venetian plaster, but the caveat with plaster is it doesn't like canvas. It will flake off. It will pop off at some time. So we're gonna start with just a regular wood board. You can use 1/4-inch, 1/2-inch plywood, and what you're gonna need to do if you're going to plaster over this, you're gonna have to use 1-step paint as your base coat, and then you can go ahead and start adding that Venetian plaster. But I'm actually gonna show you a little bit of a trick today, something a little bit different. You know me, I like to test the boundaries on stuff. Today we are going to mix, for the primer, acrylic gesso in place of the water for the Venetian plaster. And by doing that, the acrylic gesso has adhesive properties that are just going to stick to that board. Because what happens when you put Venetian plaster on a board, it wants to suck the moisture out of that Venetian plaster. So that's why you have to create that barrier, create a prime surface. So you can do it with the 1-step, super simple. And then you'll mix that Venetian plaster up. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll show you how to do that. And this is actually really easy, fun to do. And your creativity is really, it's up to you. The sky's the limit. Okay, so first we're gonna mix some Venetian plaster. We're gonna do two different batches. We're gonna do a Venetian plaster with water, and then we're gonna do a Venetian plaster with the gesso. So first, go ahead and put some cool water. You wanna mix Venetian plaster with cool water. The reason for doing that, warm water will speed up the set and it will actually make your plaster harden faster. So go ahead and start with some cool water. Put a little water into your bowl first, which will help disperse. Whoop. And see how it just kind of, the molecules soak it all up. I love science, fascinated. So go ahead, I'm just making sure we're still recording. And let that soak in for a second. And see how when you add water first and then you add the plaster in, you end up with less lumps. It's easier to deal with. But what's nice for this is you actually do not have to really worry about the lumps. The lumps are, it works in your favor. So the ratio is about 1-to-1. You want like a loose sour cream for this project because we're going to be mixing that acrylic gesso and the Venetian plaster, and then we're going to add in some more plaster to just change the texture. It's going to be our control. So just like that, easy, easy. If you were doing something a little more fine, like a wall finish, you want to get all those lumps out, you can go ahead and use a mixer. But for this, we're not too concerned, and we're actually not using a ton of Venetian plaster, which is nice. We're not using a ton. So there it is, super simple. Now we're gonna come over here and we are going to mix an acrylic gesso with the Venetian plaster. All right, so here we are with a acrylic gesso. I'm just gonna put a little bit into that bucket. You don't need a ton, and if we need to make more, we can make more. There's no really exact values. What we're looking for is more consistency, and you know, unless you're weighing it out, 1 cup is never really truly a cup. So 1-to-1 here, we'll start with that, and then you can adjust it as you go. I do recommend working with a rubber spatula, as plaster tends to stick to wood, at least with your stir stick, and it makes a beautiful mess. So here we are creating that acrylic gesso, acrylic Venetian gesso, kind of cool. And you'll notice it gets pretty clumpy, so if you need to, you can adjust by adding a little bit more of that acrylic gesso. And that's really kind of your water at this point. Now remember, this is the primer for your board or for your whatever medium you decide to use as your board. I just happen to have plywood lying around. And so it's nice and thick, and we're gonna spread that out. First, you could use a brush, you could use a trowel, you could use a hawk, whatever you're more comfortable with. Okay, so here, I like my trowel. It's fast. Again, you've got 2 different ways to do this. You can prime it with the Amy Howard at Home 1-Step Paint, and that'll be your primer. And then you could just put straight Venetian plaster over it, or you could do this method too. And so I'm gonna just spread it out. You decide how thick you want it. If you want some of that board to show through. It's just really quick and simple. But this will be the base of your art. Now remember, this is more of a rustic look. Modern, it could be modern too, which is nice. It blends really well with contemporary. And then go ahead and use your hawk to clean off or readjust where you're putting it, and just move it over again. Now you can create texture with this. You can maybe add some ridges if you like. And what's neat about this is you can always sand it down if you do not like the pattern you put on there. So it's very adjustable, very malleable. But think about where you're gonna put the placement of your art. I'm gonna add a little bit chunky here because I want my art to set into that plaster and bond together to stick to the board. That way I can avoid having to use any super glue and it becomes one. So a little bit thicker in the middle. And again, if you don't like it and you need to move it, you can always sand it down. But we're not looking to hone the board or to give it a finished look. Remember, this is more of a unfinished look. You can take your hawk and maybe scrape down if you want more board showing through. We're going to create a little more pattern here. You want to have coverage, but it doesn't necessarily have to be full coverage. And I will show you. Okay, so that's it. That's your base of your board. What I like about this stuff is it stays. If you keep it in an airtight container, you can use it for wallpaper. The acrylic gesso combined with Venetian plaster makes a really nice base for making wallpaper. It's flexible. It won't completely flake off if you just do Venetian plaster. So it gives it a little bit of strength and a little bit of flexibility because Venetian plaster is quite brittle. So that's that. Going from here, there's a couple of different options. If you would like to add in the burlap, what you will do at this point, you will cut your burlap to the size of your board, lay that burlap down, and now you'll lay the burlap onto the board. You'll load up your trowel or your hawk, and now you can just go ahead and apply all through the burlap. Make sure it's full coverage here because you want to make sure it adheres. And I had done this one the other day, and I was trying to test out for wallpaper. So I was just playing around, and I'm always experimenting. I think that's where my kids get it from. So just, there you go. You can move it around if you'd like to have that extra texture or just have the board. All right, so that's with the burlap if you so decide to choose. Remember, this was done on that technique with the burlap. And now we're going to talk about our flowers or our pieces. So if you're looking to save time, you just really want to get it done, they have these at Home Goods, Hobby Lobby. They are paper or like a wood chip flower. And so what you're going to do with these, you don't have to make anything. What you will do is you'll use an artist brush. And here is where I recommend thinning out this acrylic. Now you can paint them with one step, absolutely, and then just Venetian plaster over it. Or you can use the acrylic Venetian plaster. That is entirely up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm actually going to thin it out a little bit with some more Venetian plaster. It's getting pretty thick. You can use some cool water. I wouldn't go beyond 10% thinning, because then you're going to start to lose those the adhesive property of it. So again, you can paint them, then do Venetian plaster on them. But so just brushing on. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a little bit haphazard. You know, the perfection part is not in this art. So we're looking for more aesthetic. And you want to make sure you get all the stem. So you go ahead and you can do the entire piece there, and that will become your artwork. Once you are done completely full coverage, and you can even dip these at some point. If you get tired, put some gloves on, and you can just dip them and use your hands. I'm always using my hands. And then you'll set this into the plaster. You set it in, really pressing it in, and you're gonna let that dry. And you see how pretty, look at that. It's already starting to look something, you know, pretty. So you're gonna adjust your flowers or your art, however you want it to sit. Set it into that plaster, maybe add a little bit more plaster behind certain pieces, and then let that dry overnight. And then we'll make a frame for it. Before it dries, I do like to do something really fun. I like to take that Venetian plaster, just a little powder of it, just to give it a little, and I just kind of dust it while it's still wet to give it a little more texture. And then I let it dry. Not a ton, just a little. But so if you want to do something, so I made this board. These are figs. I handmade all of these. These are all leaves and figs done with brown paper. I made all of this with brown paper. I used 2 different grades of brown paper, a lighter, cheaper brown paper you find at Home Depot for $5. And then I had a roll, especially for the bigger leaves, I wanted a little more rigidity to them for wrapping the vines, as you can see, which I'm gonna have to go over with one-step paint and then go over with Venetian plaster. But I use that to wrap the wire I used to make these. And I just used regular wire I had. You can use floral wire, whatever you're comfortable with. You can print out whatever leaf you're trying to emulate. You'll cut it onto your board, onto your paper, cut around, you'll add hot glue, and you're going to adhere that stem into the leaf like so. You'll put another leaf on top. But before you do that, what I really recommend, see how I got that nice ridge on this leaf and a couple of them here so it looks like veins, is you take that hot glue and trace out veins and let it dry, let it harden up, then seal the leaf up together, and now you've got a really pretty leaf. And then from there, you will wrap. This is just party streamer. I didn't have crepe paper, so I used what I had and I made my own vines. For the figs, I went ahead and crumbled up paper, just like this. Kind of made it a little bit of an egg shape. And then I put the piece, a thin piece of the cardboard over it, the brown paper to go over it. And then I wrapped him in caproni wrap. So it kind of smoothed out the edge. And those are really neat. I mean, I think that's pretty good. I am gonna go over this again. As you can see, it did have some bleed. Can you see that there? I did have some bleed from the paper. So maybe, you know, I would recommend going over the vine part with one step and then going it over with Venetian plaster. But that's not a major mistake. It is all fixable. So here is an example of it prearranged plastic and paper flowers. What I did was I painted them in one-step paint, and then I went over them. Not this one yet, this is just one step. But this one, I've already gone over with Venetian plaster, as you can see. And so it gives it that more chalky looking stone finish. And, you know, you place it how you want it, you set it into the plaster, and it will adhere. This is, I haven't put it down just yet, but that's the base of it. And that will sit that way. You can make a ribbon to go on top. It'll be really pretty. This was a frame that I made with paper mache, just playing around. Here is another frame. I'm not finished with this one yet. I'm gonna add some trim to it to kind of clam it up. And I'm gonna use actually Amy's resin mold, and then I will go over it with egg tempera to give it that really pretty, make it a little more brassy looking. And that will be the frame for this piece. So that's it. I mean, as far as the frame, I will show you exactly what I used. I hope you enjoyed today. It's a simple art form, just a little creativity, playing with your mediums, getting comfortable with them. There's no right or wrong. The only thing you want to do is you want to make sure the plaster is adhering, that you have the correct surfaces with the correct prime and the correct, you can also use PVA as your primer and then plaster over that. So there's a lot of different options. You can decide how much creativity you want to put into it, or if you want to make it simple, and just use maybe already pre-made paper flowers, simple, and then put it into that plaster, and you have got just really pretty art form, But if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. I will get to them when I can, and I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoy it, and find me on Facebook and Instagram, Sandpaper and Wax Design. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.